Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Life on Mars. I'm Àlex, CEO and founder of MarsBased, and today we'll be talking about something special, breaking news. There's two great pieces of news in the Barcelona startup ecosystem that just happened overnight or have been announced in the last 24 hours, and I decided let's talk about it because I think it's great news for the ecosystem. Two big news. First of them is that Factorial raised 123.5 million in Series C of funding led by Atomico and Tiger Global. And Factorial, as you know, it is a great company hailing from Barcelona, doing an HR platform for B2B. And they have been created by the founders of Kamalun, Kipu, Itnik, among others. And they are also great friends of the company because not only they are built with Ruby on Rails, but also because we have been collaborating with them since the early beginnings of the company. Because we, as a matter of fact, we started hosting the Startup Grind events at the Itnik headquarters in the district of Poblano in Barcelona. The second piece of news is that Kantox, another Ruby on Rails company, coincidentally, has sold to BNP Paribas for 120 million. Has been announced today. We don't know the exact date of the operation when it concluded, but it has been announced today or tomorrow, yesterday at night. I remember reading it after midnight. Great news as well. Also, Kantox is one of the first companies we contacted in Barcelona. They contacted us, even though we've never worked together with neither of the companies. We're very good friends with them. As a matter of fact, I am an investor in Kantox. I joined them in, I think it should have been the late seed or the Series A series of funding back in 2015. That was my first angel investment. So obviously great news also on a personal level. But the reason why I'm bringing this up and why I think this will increase the GDP of the Barcelona startup ecosystem is because big funding rounds and more so M&A operations, large M&A operations like the exit of a startup or even IPOs are great ways of creating new entrepreneurs and bringing more money back into the ecosystem, right? So not only the founders of these companies will have more cash to invest and diversify and just help other entrepreneurs in turn in the ecosystem, because in the case of Factorial, for instance, they still have the obligation of obviously building the company, but on the side, they're doing some investment. As a matter of fact, the founders of Factorial are also the managing partners. Two of them, Jordi and Bernat, are two of the managing partners of the Itnik Fund 1, where I'm also an LP. And so they have been already angel investing and investing through this vehicle with in the Barcelona startup ecosystem. They have invested in companies like Kubo, like Corain, like Payflow, like Sierra Coffee, Hireflix, and a bunch of others. But in the case of Kantox, the founders, I know for a fact that Philippe, the CEO, has also been doing some angel investing in fintech-based startups, but after the obligation or the contractual obligation of having to stay in the company or in the acquiring company for a few years, maybe they will be turning again into the founders of another company, or they will become VCs in a firm, because usually large exits are also a good way for one to get the credibility and be accepted as a limited partner, even as a partner, full-time partner at some specialized VC or one of the VCs that have led the round or have invested big time in these companies, right? So in this case, two operations with very similar numbers, 120 million roughly, both of them. These are large numbers, perhaps not the largest numbers we've seen in Barcelona. In terms of investment, definitely, because this way Factorial achieves the so sought after unicorn status that maybe is not as cool as it was in 2014, so to speak, but definitely it makes a lot of sense right now in this bearish market, in the financial crisis, it's basically wartime for startups when a lot of them have had to cut down on expenses, lay off a lot of people. We've just gone through this layoff season in a lot of companies. We've seen it. We've seen it in Facebook. We've seen it in Netflix. We've seen it in Klarna. We've seen it in Revolut. We've seen it in like all the big players and startups that just wanted to drop some weight and reach profitability or make the numbers a little bit better for the investors, because they were bracing themselves against this sort of, I don't know, financial winter. And so I think it's a great achievement for Factorial to get this status, to reach the status of unicorn, not for the status per se, but because I think that it proves that great companies can be built also amidst these kind of contrary or adverse situations. There's certainly not a great economic landscape out there. It's more difficult than ever to raise money. It's more difficult than ever to sell. It's more difficult than ever to hire people. And so they've proven a lot of people wrong. It goes to show that not only they have a great business, but also that they can build a larger one. If big players like Atomico and Tiger Global, and also all the other VCs that they've got, I think they also have Creandum, I think they've got also K-Fun and some others. It goes to show that they believe, they've seen, obviously these big VCs have seen a lot of companies that probably talked, even maybe have invested in their competitors, but they are now showing that they believe that Factorial can be the number one player in this landscape, in their sector. So great news for the ecosystem, because that brings a lot of credibility to the Barcelona startup ecosystem. And more than anything, I think that, as I mentioned, this creates ecosystem. This gives back money to entrepreneurs. They will, people who have worked or are still working at Factorial, they will become the next generation of entrepreneurs, because they will have been part of one of the largest scale-ups in the company, one of the fastest growing companies in the Barcelona startup ecosystem, and one of the most successful examples of how to build a technological company in the B2B space. So therefore, people who have learned throughout all these years and during the highs and lows of Factorial, they will then have the experience and perhaps also the money to build new ventures based on whatever they've learned or some market opportunities they have identified while at Factorial. And I'm pretty sure that Bernat, Jordi, and the rest of folks at the INDIC Fund 1, they will be the first to back people who quit Factorial to create their own venture, because it has happened. As a matter of fact, the INDIC Fund 1 invested in Latitude, which is a company created by Cesar Miguel Áñez, former product at Factorial. So I'm pretty sure that there will be more Cesars in the next few years. The current VPs or even C-levels of the company will just quit and go for a new venture whenever the company turns too big, or things change, or they lose motivation, or they find a good opportunity. And so with all that accumulated expertise, know-how, a few hires, and a bunch of tickets and checks from angel investors, they will create new ventures. So that creates an ecosystem. As I said, big M&As, big financial rounds of funding, they create ecosystem. In both cases, they're super positive. On a technological level, which might be less relevant perhaps to a lot of people, but it's very relevant for us, because two companies using Ruby on Rails have proved that you can still build companies with Ruby on Rails. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people creating the new companies, branching off or forking from or spinning off from Factorial and Kantox, they might choose to start their new companies using Ruby on Rails, because that's what they use, that's what they're that they have learned, that's what they have seen the developers in this company using. So they might think, it worked out pretty well. It was fast enough to prototype. It was it kept the developers happy. It was difficult to hire, definitely, but the ROI on building projects with Ruby on Rails is sufficiently interesting to give it another go. So I think it's great news overall. And to a certain extent, I also wanted to comment on one theory that I had that I've been consolidating over the years. That is that we are right now seeing maybe not the peak, but we're starting to ascend pretty high on the third wave of startups in Barcelona. Namely, we had a first wave of startups, the creators of the Spanish internet in the 1990s. It was kind of companies like Intercom, InfoJobs, every company that derived from Intercom, like InfoJobs, the Trovits, the Softonics, the El Tenedor. So all of these kind of companies that were super oriented in the Spanish-speaking market. Maybe they expanded internationally to go to Latin America because of a language thing. And they wouldn't encounter the language barrier of having to speak English. Most of the CEOs of these companies or the founding members of these companies, even the investors, they didn't speak English back then because they belonged to a generation that didn't learn English in their high school or middle school or even elementary school because, I think that it was until the 70s, people would learn French as a first foreign language in Spain, right? And also, English was never really spoken in Spain until late into the 2000s. So they never needed English to go out and negotiate because everything was kind of like financed through Spanish banks and even some Spanish VCs and traditional investors and whatnot. So they didn't really need English. So these companies were mostly e-commerces, they were marketplaces. They were pretty reliant on SEO, lots of content, lots of, as I said, like marketplaces and e-commerces are the ones that come top of the mind. They were called the internet businesses, then digital businesses, but they weren't even called startups because we didn't use that word back in the day. So this first generation this first wave of startups are the ones that whenever they made it big, they IPO, they sold the company, whatnot, they turn into either serial entrepreneurs, like in the case of Nacho González Barros, the founder of InfoJobs, who then went on to create Neurona, Niumba, Salir.com, Mailtrack, Hireflix, and whatnot, and others, they have become angel investors because these might have been the first generation of angel investors that were not former bankers, because up until I would say, I'm just throwing random numbers here, but maybe 2005, even 2010, all of the angel investors in the market or in the Spanish startup ecosystem were former bankers or just wealthy people who just wanted to help their friends and then loan them some money. But no real experience in startups whatsoever. So their contribution were mostly monetary only, and they didn't understand the dynamics of digital businesses, of internet, of SaaS, of recurring revenue, of investing in growth, or other kind of caveats and shenanigans of these kind of companies, right? But they provided financial strength to the companies and maybe some advice, but they weren't really, really helpful in what we would call today the smart investment, right? Smart money. But then again, then came the second wave of startups, which we saw. I dated between the years 2008 and 2014, more or less. So after the financial crisis we had, or throughout the financial crisis 2008, and then up until 2014, for me it's an arbitrary number, but more or less that's when the second wave of startups started and lived. And the main difference between the first and the second is that the second is either people from the first one with an international co-founder, say an expat, or somebody who just relocated to Barcelona, or has been invested by the people, the angel investors that were created in the first wave of startups, right? So in this case, are companies that, because they have, in a lot of cases, it's one local guy with an international guy. So therefore, they're English first, global market oriented, so always thinking bigger, perhaps. Looking to go to the US. They have raised money abroad, not from Spanish investors. There's companies like, and typically they're more like B2C, because that was the explosion of like the Groupons, Grupalias, Privalias, delivery companies, Glovo, there was Typeform, Buddy, So all of these companies that, in the case of Glovo, there's Sasha, who is from the UK, if I'm not mistaken, and Oscar is from Barcelona. In the case of Kantox, who is also part of it, maybe they're not B2C, but they belong definitely to the second wave. There's Tony, who is from Mallorca, with Philippe, who is from France. Then you've got other companies like Typeform. For instance, two of the two founders of Typeform. One of them is from Barcelona. The other one, David, is a mashup from like Belgium, UK, and some other countries. Hard to pinpoint where he's from. What else? What other companies? I mean, top of mind, other companies from that era. Probably would say Buddy, would say Camaloon, other companies from there. But typically very B2C oriented, right? And they might have been big companies or not that big, but as I said, main difference is the first wave, Spanish speaking, only Spanish markets. Then the second wave is English first and global oriented from day one. And now I'm focusing on the third wave, which I believe is going to be a game changer for Barcelona, because this third wave is mostly B2B. It doesn't have anything to do with who are the founders, who are the investors, what they've done differently. It's mostly companies created around year 2014 onwards, and they have been focusing heavily on B2B. Kantox was perhaps a little bit ahead of their time, and it shows that their growth was, they kind of like hit a plateau for a couple of years back in 2014 and whatnot, because maybe Spain and Barcelona in particular didn't have the credibility in B2B, right? But somebody had to start. We hadn't had a lot of successes in B2B or companies paving the way for the new generation. So in a way, I think Kantox has done that for a lot of companies coming after. But in this third wave, we are seeing companies like TravelPerk, EasyPace, I've got a few over here, a Happy Scribe, Factorial, of course, Exotica, Amenities. So these companies that they are B2B, heavily focused on introducing the playbooks for sales from American startups, very culture oriented, strong leadership, very oriented towards community as well. Great product, great technology, and they know their shit, because most of them, they have identified something that was missing in the value proposition chain, and they have decided to tackle that. For instance, in the case of TravelPerk, Avi, from the CEO of TravelPerk, used to work at Booking.com with Javi. Oh, maybe he didn't work at Booking.com. Booking.com bought his previous company, I think, Hotel Ninjas, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on this. I know Javi, one of the co-founders of TravelPerk, did work at Booking.com, so I'm right on this one. And he asked the people at Booking.com whether they would be doing B2B, because he wanted to build Booking.com for B2B. And Booking said, no, we're not going to do that, because we only have like 9% of the market, and we want to tap on the other 91% that's left. So definitely B2B is not a priority. So Javi went on and recruited or convinced Avi to create TravelPerk, which is essentially Booking.com for B2B, right? So I'm very excited about this as somebody who builds B2B, as somebody who sells B2B, and more than anything, as somebody who invests as an angel investor in B2B. Or I always say that I invest in B2B startups and B2C that they don't know yet that they're going to be B2B, right? Because that's where the money is. And so very excited about this, because this creates a new landscape of opportunities. This proves that B2B and enterprise software can be built from Barcelona. And there's a great selection of companies that are proving this. So in a way, Kantox and Factorial have just paved the way for this new generation, for this new wave of startups. We will see more, because there's a time for market consolidation, and we have seen a lot of consolidation, and I have commented on that in previous episodes in the consulting or agencies sector. A lot of them have exited or have merged in the last year. in the last year, in the last 12 months. We will see more in the B2B space, and I'm really excited about what's to come for the future of the Barcelona startup ecosystem. So without further ado, just wanted to send my congratulations to both teams. They're great friends, good people overall. They're great. They're doing a great service to the city of Barcelona, to the ecosystem as a whole. And I wish them good and the best continuation for their success. So let's stay tuned for more news, and see you in the next episode. Bye.